So I'm going to attempt to demonstrate to you all how you can use the materials that you've been using, the painting gouache, to create different patterns and textures. For the most part, this is a fairly simple thing to do. The thing that's most difficult is having control over the brush and the brush strokes, and really being able to use those in a very specific way in order to create very fine lines and very thin lines. So all my materials are set up here that I've been using. My paints are all mixed, and you can see all my paints are mixed. What I also have is my water. I have a cup here that has clean water in it, and this cup has a little droplet because if my paint gets dry, I'll use it to add more moisture. This is the cup that I use to wash my brushes. And I have two different trays. This tray contains all of my tertiary colors, the browns that I mixed for my skin tones. And these are my primary colors and secondary colors. I have some black over here and white over here. For this though, I'm not gonna really use all of those colors. What I'm gonna do is focus on one section at a time. And so I started already, as you might be able to see, in this section to create a texture. And basically, all I'm doing is a pattern of lines, a series of lines, and I'm just changing the directions of the series of lines. So this is more of a yellow ochre background. So I used my red and that Indian yellow, marigold kind of yellow, and I mixed those together, and I'll show you what it looks like. And that's the color that I'm using on top of that. This is the color that I'm using on top to basically create those hatch marks. And so once you put the brush in the paint, I used my paper towel, I'll show you in a minute, and I use it to just basically wipe off all the excess paint. Too much, it's going to make the paint puddle. It also helps to make a fine, very fine tip of the brush. And then once I have that done, I kind of rest my arm, my elbow. You can see my elbow is resting on the table. And I'm going to just alternate and change the directions of my lines. You might want to test this out on the side of your paper or somewhere else before, and that's totally okay. Sometimes I even go on this side and I wipe it off to make sure my lines are fine, and I actually practice a little bit before I get started, right, to make sure. We want the paint that you're using to be pretty loose, but meaning that it's not too thick. You don't want too much water in it. But it should be loose enough to fill up your brush so that you can use it and make a very thin layer of lines. So this seems like it's a very simple thing to do, and it's a very repetitive thing to do. However, it's building up those skills to be able to manage your muscles in your hands enough so you can control your pressure of the brush. Controlling the pressure of the brush is very key here. Do not press down too hard. And it's okay for what I'm doing. I'm doing this section first on purpose because it allows me to change and make a little bit of mistakes without making it look too disruptive for my picture. In certain other areas, I'm going to have to be able to control it better. So that's why it's really good. So that line right there is very thick, you can see. That's why it's really good to start in a general area, right? And get down and then build up the skills that you need to be able to move to an area that you have to be more specific. My background and this pattern, overall, it's going to look really specific from a distance, but as I'm building it up, it's pretty gestural. It's pretty, it's not entirely uniform. So that's okay for me to make mistakes here. When I get to the part where I need to manage my brush stroke and handle the weight of the pressure that I'm putting on the brush more, then I'll be more equipped to do that. I'll be able to do that better. For instance, let's say I wanted to do the flower, and I have to have more control when I'm doing the flower. I already did it, but I'm planning to do some highlights in here and go over it. So in this area, that's where I need to have the finest of brush strokes, right? As skinny as I can make it here. And this is okay. I could make it even more fine, but sometimes you have to build up to that. That's okay. Personally, I would have liked it to be a little more fine. Okay, so here, for instance, I'm going over my letters. Okay, I already put one layer of paint on this, but I'm going over the lines again. Very thin lines that I'm doing. And because I was able to do it in the background here, it actually helped me in order to be able to do it in the more specific areas where I have to have a lot more control. So here I am, I'm doing my W. And I chose this W. I'll talk a little bit about the W. It's the initials for my brother. My family's name, my surname is Walters, and so was his too. His initials was LAW, which is really cool. Interesting. And I looked up some Ethiopian Coptic lettering. And I chose the Ethiopian Coptic lettering because I felt like it was a really strong connection to African roots, but also a strong connection to the roots of iconography. And so very carefully, you want to go over that. I was able to see, I made a little mistake in here, and here it was a little too thick. Here I overlaid it a little bit, so I can wait for it to dry and wait for my hand to get better before I can go in and try to fix that up. But because I was able to do these strokes and allow myself to be able to build up in this area and make the mistakes here, it really helped when I went to do more specific areas. So we're going to use hatch marks and cross hatching also to build up some tints and tones and create highlights on the face later, much like what I did on the shirt. But now when I do it on the face, I'm going to have to use brown tones, right? Because the skin tone color is brown. So I'm using my lightest brown to start with, and I'm just gonna do a little bit in the face to show you guys. And then I add a little bit of white paint to it. And here I am mixing my paint. I'm mixing it on the side here. And this is the white that I have. It's got a little brown in it. And this white is going to become my highlight on parts of the face that has highlight, like the nose, maybe a little bit on the top lip, and a little bit on the forehead. And I'm starting with this to begin with because I don't know if it's light enough yet. I don't know if it's too light or not light enough. So I'm going with something that I think might be a little bit too brown to start with, because I can always get lighter, but I cannot get darker at this point with this. Okay, so again, cross hatching, hatch marks on the nose. We know that there's there's usually a little bit of light. Forehead, right? There's a little bit of light. Okay, we can use this to highlight maybe the light falling on the nose. There's usually a little bit of highlight under our eyebrows here. On the cheek is also, there will be some highlight over in this area. Okay, and I'm doing it not straight. I'm curving my lines here. As you guys can see, I'm curving my lines a little bit. I'm doing that on purpose because these are round areas. It's not a flat surface. This is actually a face. Now the planes of the face, they change directions, right? And you can use the lines to emphasize those planes. Okay, I think I noticed that my white in this case might be a little too white, so here I'm toning it down, and I added a little bit of that marigold kind of Indian yellow to this. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back, make sure my tip is nice and thin, and I can go in this and see I can actually use this to tone the white if I feel like it's a little bit too much in areas. Go on top of the white. Okay, so that's why it's really good to start with a more medium light, not white completely, because what if it's too white? You want to be able to change it and adjust it later. There will be areas that you want total white, like for here, the tip of the nose, right at the tip of the nose, I might want to put a little white, right? There is a little white highlight in his eyes, the twinkle of his eye, right there. Okay, to show where the light is. A little dot inside of his eye. I realized the brown that I had before, on one side it showed up, on here it didn't show up so much, so I'm going to put a little bit more. Okay, so this is basically how we want to use our brush strokes to help add. See what just happened? I put too much water, and because I did it in a small area, I can get a nice piece of paper towel, make it small, and it's still wet, so I can just dab to get it out. And then once that's dry, I'm going to go in with dark brown and go back over that area. Okay, give it a little time to dry. Okay, I think I make it, that's good enough for now. I think it still needs to dry a little bit more, but there, I was able to fix it. Right, so that's it for now. I'm going to continue to work on this and then I'll show you guys what it looks like